Hey friends, I'm Chris. I'm from Transformation Nation Yoga and Wellness. There was some questions on Facebook about my evening gravity yoga routine. I'm happy to share. This is not something that I made up. I pulled these poses out of Lucas Rockwood's gravity yoga system. Uh, I spend about a 25-minute period um, working on these and doing this consistently. I found my hips have really opened up. So I'll turn 50 this summer, summer 2022. I have prosthetic hip, herniated disc in my back, and my hips have never been more mobile. So this has been a really great addition to my wellness practice. So I'm going to do this practice tonight on a yoga mat and a blanket. So you could choose to do that. I'll be honest, most nights I do this in my living room on the carpet while watching television. So that's also an option. I'd like you to have one or two foam or cork yoga blocks, and a bolster would be really useful. You may not choose to use the bolster at all. I've got one application for the practice tonight for which is pretty important. You could also, in lieu of the bolster, we're going to use it during a deep squat. You could do your squat without any support if both your hips and your ankles are mobile and healthy for that. You could also use a chair or you could use a wall. So pause your recording, gather your materials. When you're ready, press play, and I'll meet you in your practice space for this 25-minute evening gravity yoga hip opening routine. All right, friends, we're going to start out with um, get, probably what you would call cow face pose. In yin yoga, I would refer to this as shoelace pose. I'm going to set this up. I'm going to turn to the side to set it up initially. Also, under resources, I should have mentioned having a stopwatch is really useful. You could use the timer on your phone as well. So if you start out in the tabletop position, like a quadruped position, like a child crawling, so shoulders floating over your wrists, hips floating over your knees, take your right knee forward to the center of your mat and angle your right ankle over to the left hand side of your mat. Now, swim the hands way forward, step your left foot over your right. Notice both knees kiss the earth initially, right? And then start walking your hands back towards your knees. And you can start with 2 blocks under your seat. Try that. If you have space, reach back, remove a block. You can sit on a single block. If you have space, reach back, remove a block, lower your feet down to the earth. That's too much to me. I'll tell you about sensation in a minute. What we're looking for, if you think about a scale of sensation from 0 to 10, where at 0 you felt nothing, and 10 would be excruciating, I'd like you to be at a 7 or an 8, right? Higher than an 8 is not helpful. Lower than a 7 for what we're trying to do isn't helpful. And I'm going to start the timer here. Now, I'm going to turn and face the camera. I'm going to turn and face you. All right, so a couple of other tools if you wanted to add sensation. I'm at a 7 right now. I'm not going to change a thing. You could wing the feet forward, but if you can, leave the knees stacked as much as you can. You can see from my knees, it's not perfect. That's okay. The other thing you could do, with or without bringing the feet forward, fold forward, maybe forehead coming down onto a bolster or a couple of blocks. But again, I'm at a 7, and once you're at that 7, see if you can find some stillness. Now, I don't always think, I've been doing this practice for quite a while, 6 months consistently, and I've been practicing gravity yoga on again, off again for about a year. I don't need the breath as much right here. My body's pretty acclimated to this high level of sensation. So this is in a threshold between discomfort and pain. This is just over the threshold, just into pain. So to do that, in order to relax, a lot of times that level of sensation will trigger a sympathetic nervous system response. So if that's your experience and you're fighting just to stay in it, try this breath. This is called a 4-8 relaxation breath. So it will be a 4 count inhale through your nose, followed by an 8 count exhale through your mouth. As you make that 8 count exhale, make a ha sound through the mouth. The ha might be audible and it doesn't need to be. So inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale through your mouth. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale. Exhale. All right, keep that breath up. 4 count inhale through your nose, followed by an 8 count exhale through your mouth. So this breath, this 4-8 relaxation breath is vagal toning. It triggers a parasympathetic nervous system response. Super relaxing. So I've had people come to a science of stretching class, practice gravity yoga for 60 minutes in the evening, and leave super sleepy. And they sometimes at first when we do that we think it's the yoga practice itself, and it's not really. It's that breath. So this is another reason why this routine is a great evening practice, is it helps kind of ease a path down toward optimizing toward a restful night of sleep. So here's the other reason not to take it at these poses at a sensation level of higher than an 8, um, or without the breath, at least until your body's acclimated to it. If you're fighting just to stay in the pose because it's painful, um, the research shows pretty clearly that muscles stretch best when they're relaxed. So getting toward a long-term goal of unlocking better mobility, our basic range, restoring our basic range of motion in our body is probably not going to happen if we're so keyed up in such pain that we just can't focus. Now, it's not a conventional yoga instruction to go into a pain threshold, right? So let me talk a little bit about what we mean when we're talking about that level of sensation too. So if we're talking about diffuse areas, so the sensation I have is in my deep 6 lateral hip rotators on the outside of both hips, right? If somebody says, "Where's the pain?" and they point to big, broad circles, we're fine. We're good. But if somebody said, "Where's the pain?" and it's very specific, you can point to it with one finger, and it's in a joint, that's no good. That is no good. Nothing good will come from that. So keep that in mind as well. How's that 4-8 breath working for you? All right, so I'm going to turn to the side here as we come out of this pose. So you stay right here. I'm going to turn to the side first. Now, the left leg is basically set up for where we want it on the other side. So swim the hands forward, come up onto the tips of your fingers, unwind your right leg from behind your left, step your right knee over your left, both knees kiss the earth, walk your hands back towards your knees, sit on 2 blocks, 1 block, no block, maybe wing the feet forward, maybe fold forward. You guys stay right where you are. I'm going to turn and face you again. We want the knees more or less stacked, but again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Right? I know people that can easily sit on the ground. Their legs, their knees will be stacked, shins will come parallel to the front of the edge of the mat and fold forward. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. That's not my experience in my body. So whatever you're finding in your body, whether you're getting that full mobility already, or if it's something less, something closer to mine, or less mobile, it's fine. It's fine. It's all good, friends. That's why we're doing the practice. So another area of my body which is tight, it's just like not dissimilar for a lot of middle-aged men my age in our society, is thoracic spine and shoulders. So it is possible here. So one thing that I've done in the past with this pose in particular is do an archer pose as well, with a strap in between my hands and working my hands up the strap. right? So that it's possible to work more than one area at the same time. My concern in my body is I just want to keep the attention focused on one part of the anatomy at a time, and right now it's really the hips where I'm working. So I'm going to work primarily on hip mobility with gravity yoga for about the first year. And I'll look at upper back and shoulders. I could do some work with back and hamstrings. The curriculum, if you go through the Lucas's flexibility coach teacher training, again, this used to be called the gravity yoga teacher training. He gives sequences, specified sequences that you could use right away for hamstrings, back, and hips. But with a little bit of flexibility, a teacher could put together a targeted mobility training pretty easily. Or if there's another area, like I mentioned shoulders, I put together a 60-minute shoulder program based on gravity yoga poses. So all of that is possible. It's a good system. Now, like it differs from other forms of yoga in that there's no particular energetic system. It's not intended to be spiritual. It's more of an athletic practice. But is it yoga, right? I know some purists who would say that means it's not yoga. I'm going to tell you that, like, from my perspective, and I'm not the most experienced yoga teacher in the world, but I've been teaching 4 or 5 years. I think it's movement in tandem with breath, which, based on my understanding, qualifies it as yoga. But that's my opinion. You get to have your own. Right? If you've forgotten that 4-8 breath, come back to your 4-8 breath now. Check in with the level of sensation. You get pain in the knees, try flexing the feet. And that's not particularly, like that wouldn't be a particularly common yin or gravity yoga instruction, but, but it is a pretty good trade-off. You get pain in the knees, flex the toes. So we have about another minute in this pose. Now, when we transition and come out of this, before I had you come forward onto the hands because the left leg was already set up basically where we wanted. This time when we come out, we're going to basically start from scratch with the legs. I'm a lot less concerned with that. So as long as you use good body mechanics, when you come out of this next time, come out of it however you want. About 2 more rounds of 4-8 breath. Inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4, exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4, exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Great job. Unwind the legs. Again, good body mechanics, which for my body means stack joints. And we're going to go into square pose. So take your left shin. Let me back up on my mat a little bit so you can see me. Left shin more or less parallel to the top edge of your mat. Hook the pinky edge blade of your right foot on the outside of that left knee. And then stack the shins. Now, it's human nature, right? It doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong, but the natural human tendency here is that left heel is going to want to scoot in toward your seat, which will take away sensation. That's not what you want. So continue pressing that left shin forward. Now, you may find that this right knee is lifted way up over your left ankle, right? That's okay. One of the cool things about this square pose, this pose can be really confronting for people. So often people have either a love-hate relationship with square pose, or sometimes it's just a straight up hate-hate relationship. It's okay. It's okay. Um, One thing that I would say about square pose, and I've heard Lucas say the same thing, is even within a single practice, we're going to hold this 5 minutes per side, can potentially see a dramatic improvement um, in the mobility on this one side. Now, after one practice, it'll be very different often from the beginning to the end of the practice, but the next day you're starting over again. But over time, like my right knee didn't come most of the way down to that left ankle. used to take 2 or 3 minutes for it to get there. And I didn't start with it exactly down there today, but we've been in this pose for less than a minute and a half, and it's all good there now. So I'm at a 7, right? In my body, I'm at threshold. There's no reason to change anything. But if you still got space and your body wants more and you want to add sensation, you could also walk your hands forward, fold forward over your right shin. So for gravity yoga, there are really 3 components. Now, I mentioned that 4-8 down regulating breath. By the way, if you're not doing that breath, come back to that breath now. So that's one principle. The second principle is time under passive tension, which means we have to meet or beat our hold times. So if you're serious about improving mobility in your body, it means that the hold times don't get shorter over time, they get longer over time, up to about 5 minutes. And from 5 minutes on, the research shows it doesn't seem to make much of a difference with mobility. So I think just in terms of being efficient with time, in my body, I'm not going to take the time to do a gravity yoga pose longer than 5 minutes per side. The juice, as they say, is not worth the squeeze. So 4-8 breath, time under passive tension. The other thing I'll say about time, use a timer, use a stopwatch. I had an evening flexibility and stretching program for years because I knew I wasn't flexible. I experienced zero gains after years of doing like what I thought was pretty hard work. And I thought I was keeping count, but I was keeping count in my head, right? And then I got stopwatch, which I buy from Amazon for $2 for $6. It's not a big investment, friends. And when I first got the stopwatch, I was comparing it to my count. And what I found, what my count was not accurate, and it was shorter, not longer. So use a stopwatch. 4-8 breath, time under passive tension. Um, and the third is a principle that Lucas calls wet noodle. And wet noodle is an idea that I already mentioned. The research shows clearly and convincingly that muscles stretch best when they're relaxed. So in the area that you're trying to stretch, it's really advantageous to relax everything there. Now, you will find in some gravity yoga poses, um, like if we're working on something in the lower body, in order to maintain that position, we have to engage the upper body, the arms, shoulders, and chest a little bit, and vice versa, right? That's okay. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. If it was another form of yoga, um, yin, for example, I might suggest that once people got set up, any muscular engagement that wasn't necessary in order to maintain that alignment and allow gravity to draw the connective tissues down toward the earth should be relaxed, right? But it's also not completely dissimilar. If you take vinyasa yoga, most of the time the language might be a little different, but the cues are designed to balance effort with ease. So we'll be efforting in some part of the body in order to maintain the pose, but trying to relax everywhere else. So I feel like that's pretty similar to that. So we are coming up on 5 minutes in this square pose. So you can start to unwind as you set up for the other side, right shin, parallel to the top edge of your mat, hook the pinky edge blade of your left foot on the top of your right knee, and lower that left knee down in the general direction of your right ankle. It may not touch. It may not touch. And you may see fairly dramatic differences from one side of the body. I don't know that it's that evident in this video right now. This hip, this left hip, is a prosthetic, and it's not that old. I've only had it for about 2 years. So it took, when I first started this practice, my square pose, my knee was right up here, and it would come part of the way down, but there was no way that I could get my left knee all the way down to my right ankle, even after a full 5 minutes. And that was after months of practicing gravity yoga. Over time, with some consistency, we find that. So one of my goals is to be able to do a healthy and natural squat. And a passive squat is how we're going to close this practice for tonight. Um, And I think with my hip mobility, my hips are there. One of my mentors and my trainers for my 300-hour yoga teacher training used to say, if I want to know how healthy somebody is, I'll ask them to squat. And when I see them squat, I have a pretty good sense of how healthy they are, which was a little triggering for me, if I'm honest, because I couldn't squat well, because I didn't have a healthy range of motion, in spite of being a yoga teacher and having been a yoga practitioner for years. But for me, it was using the right training methodology. And this gravity yoga training methodology seems to be the one that really makes a difference here. So I think I have the hip mobility for a full squat, and yet if I try to do a squat without the kind of support that I'm going to show you, I'll spill over onto my backside. Right at this point, I think it's not hip mobility; it's ankle mobility. So I've also got, like, some nights in my gravity yoga practice, I had about 10 minutes of drawing the toes back toward my shin. I have this little plastic wheel that I put my heel on. So I'm not going to use it for the practice tonight. Your ankles may be fine. If you have questions about that, message me and I'll send that to you as well. How's that 4-8 breath treating you? So just like one more note, gravity yoga practice can create a temporary joint laxity in the joints that you're focusing on. So for this particular practice, hips, right? For most bodies, it's not going to be a problem, and it's not going to keep you from going about your day-to-day activities. But if you planned on heavy weightlifting, running, anything super intense, give yourself about 2 hours after the end of the gravity yoga practice before you take on that more vigorous physical practice. So this is another reason why I feel like gravity yoga really lends itself to the evening. You can do it in the morning, but between the down regulating breath, um, it just doesn't set your nervous system up for you being awake and alert the rest of the day. And the temporary joint laxity, again, won't hurt a thing as long as you exercise a little bit of caution, but it may restrict your activity a little bit. 5 more rounds of the 4-8 breath. Right, so when we move into the passive squat, what I'm looking for are feet hip distance apart, toes turned out about 12 degrees, lower your seat down toward the earth. Right, you might be able to do that with no other support. That's fine. I want your heels on something. In, say, contemporary vinyasa yoga, it's really common for people to teach this, say it's okay with the heels lifted. And I agree with that. It's not wrong. The thing about a squat with the heels lifted is it's not really a pathway toward eventually doing a healthy and natural squat. I don't know anyone that's come into yoga with poor hip mobility that's practiced the squat with the heels elevated that have eventually worked toward a full and natural squat. If you do, if that's you, message me. I'd be curious to hear about your experience as well. So I'd like your heels on something. So you could roll a blanket up under your heels. I'm going to use a bolster. You could place, like, I have a wooden stool that sometimes I use in my practice. You could place a stool or a chair under your seat. You could do this with your back up against the wall. That way, like, fire in the legs, you get the mobility in the hips, but lots and lots of support for the back. Those are all options. With good body mechanics, unwind. Whew. All right, and let's move into that squat. So again, regardless of how you choose to set it up, feet hip distance apart, toes turned out about 12 degrees, lower your seat down to the earth, right? And then a lot of times in vinyasa yoga, for mulasana squat, you'll be cued to put your elbows in your inner thighs. Press your elbows out into your inner thighs, press your inner thighs out into your elbows. But here, remember our wet noodle principle. So you can relax, fold your fingertips down toward the earth, and let your forehead fold down toward the earth as well. What tends to happen over time as we age, our tissues dry out. That's a biological fact, right? But we can continue to keep ourselves younger and to keep all of our tissues better hydrated and maintain flexibility over time. Often, as we lose our mobility, we think that's just a part of the aging process, and we have to live with that. One of the things that Lucas says in his gravity yoga training is that it's never too late for us to restore a basic range of motion. And I'm going to be honest, I kind of rolled my eyes at that. But yeah, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. All right, remember, friends, if you're not doing that 4-8 breath, especially if you're struggling in this pose, come back into that 4-8 breath. Right? So, like, what I thought was is probably ought to have a disclaimer, like a results not typical or something like that. But Lucas said a lot of things. One of the other things that he said was he said like it's never too late for us to restore our basic range of motion. So that's a range of motion in each part of the body that we had early childhood when everything in our bodies was pretty well balanced. He also said like he doesn't think it's realistic for most people to do like a 60-minute gravity yoga practice a day. Most people don't have time for that. Right? A lot of times, especially if people are approaching yoga as a workout, as a physical workout rather than a spiritual practice, they're they're looking for something that's going to get the heart rate up, maybe work their muscles and develop greater conditioning and things like that. And that there can be a lot less patience for things like mobility training. But Lucas also says, in order to really reap the benefits of this training methodology, we don't need to do it for an hour a day. If you spend 15 minutes a day working through this practice, and you do that every day, that can make a huge difference in mobility over time. And that has proven itself to be true. And it's also made me a believer in what he said about it's never too late for us to restore a basic range of motion. So you're only seeing three poses, right? We looked at shoelace pose, square pose, and a passive squat. But if you become more familiar with the poses in the gravity yoga system, what Lucas advises is spending 10 minutes in poses that you hate, right? So if that square pose is really confronting, 5 minutes per side in square pose, and then 5 minutes in a pose that you hate a lot less, right? Because you kind of want to finish with something that you're going to want to come back to. And if you do that, and again, like, is it wrong to have your home yoga practice on your living room carpet with the television on, talking with your partner and watching TV? No, no. There will be purists that say that's wrong, but that's not really yoga. That's not a home practice, and that's fine. That's fine, but that doesn't have to be the right answer for you. We're talking about your practice. So that 15 minutes a day, again, this practice that we're doing tonight is 25 minutes. I've been doing this for about the last 6 months. Powerful, powerful, and helpful for me. All right, so about two more rounds of 4-8 breath here. We're done. I'm just going to show you what I mean about the ankle mobility. I'll turn to the side in the squat, and I'll lose the support, the bolster from under my heels, and I'll show you what I'm working with here. But the good thing is, like, you can apply this training methodology to any part of your body. Like the ankle stretches that I told you that I've been doing, they're not conventional, typical. They're not in Lucas's gravity yoga teacher training manual. But I apply the principles of gravity yoga, so I'm very confident it's going to work. All right, that's 5 minutes. So however you come out of this, use good body mechanics. All right, and let me just turn to the side and show you. So feet out hip distance apart, toes turned out 12 degrees. That's pretty good for me, but my seat wants to roll backwards here. Right, so I'll work on the ankle mobility, but over time I know that squat's going to be there for me. Great job, friends. Again, I'm Chris. I'm from Transformation Nation Yoga and Wellness. This is the 25-minute hip opening gravity yoga routine that I do every evening that's made a huge difference in the flexibility for my hips. Again, this is based on Lucas Rockwood's gravity yoga system. Today he teaches this under a flexibility coach curriculum, but it's basically the same curriculum. I think consistency is key. If you did this routine or a gravity yoga routine to unlock whatever part of your body is most stuck, 15 to 25 minutes a night, and you did that consistently over several months, you will see a huge difference in your mobility. You're doing amazing, friends. Just keep going.